In this video, I'm going to show you some of the most common ways of increasing and decreasing so that you can add shape to your knitting garment. So once you've mastered this, you shouldn't be afraid to go and try any pattern, okay? Because by this point, you'll have learned how to do garter stitch, stocking stitch, rib stitch, and once you can do increase and decrease, you can do shaping, so you can go make jumpers and anything. So please be brave from here on out, and you can go and try anything you want. I've just started with a few rows of stocking stitch here, so I'm doing knit a row, purl a row, just so that I can show you things on both sides. So I've got 10 stitches to start with, and it's always a good idea to know how many stitches you've got, especially if you're increasing and decreasing, because if we make a mistake, the sooner we spot it, the less work we have to undo. Okay, so one of the most common increase stitches is to knit into the front and the back of the stitch. And this quite often happens towards the edge. If you're doing a garment, if you're making a toy or something shaped like that, then it might happen across the row. Same if you're doing hats, we have shaping, that's usually a decrease though. We have shaping across the row, evenly spaced out. So to knit into the front of the back, it's exactly the same. So you start off as if you were going to knit, and then you take your yarn round and you bring it off. The only thing we don't do is slide the stitch off, okay? Because I'm going to put the needle now into the back of the stitch. Okay, so the loop behind. And I'm going to do the same thing then. I'm going to wrap it around and take it under. And now I'm going to slide off. And you can see that I've made 2 stitches now instead of just 1. Okay, so same again. I take it in as if I was going to knit normally, wrap around, bring the needle under, but don't slide off. You're going to put the tip of the needle into the back loop and then do the same again. Yarn over, bring it under, and then take it off. So you create 2 stitches where you had 1. So into the front, wrap it around and bring it under, but don't slide off. Go into the back of the stitch, wrap your yarn around, bring it under, and this time slide it off. So now I've got 6 stitches out of the 3 stitches I had. Okay, so if I do this all the way across, I'm going to end up with 20 stitches instead of 10. All right, and literally I'm going into the front of the stitch and then I'm going into the back of the stitch every time. Okay, now some toys, there is a toy designer called Alan Dart. He quite often starts like this, so his first row can quite often be increasing the stitches, because obviously depending on what you're making, sometimes you need to increase in size quite rapidly, so doing it into every stitch does happen. Less common with a garment, but like I say, it depends on what you want to go and make next. Okay, so I've done that into every stitch, including my last one. So I've now got 20 stitches on my needle, and I'm on a purl row because I'm doing stocking stitch. Okay, now you can do the same with purl. All right, I can go into the front and back of every stitch. Now remember, with purl, you need the yarn on top. We've got it in front. So again, to purl, we go into the front, wrap round, and it's exactly the same. We go under, but we don't take it off. Now, the tricky bit here is, in order to get into the back of the stitch, we're coming from the other side, okay? So what I did then was I put my needle in as if I was going to knit it, just to create a little bit of slack. And then I come at it from behind, again, wrap around. So this one's a little bit trickier, just because it's a little bit more manoeuvring. Okay, it's exactly the same thing. I create 2 stitches out of 1. So again, into the front of the stitch and wrap around, go under but don't take it off. And then, like I say, I like to just create a little bit of slack, and then you come at it from behind. Oh, and you nearly lost that then. Right, I'm just going to take that off just because I've not quite got enough slack, I don't think. So I'm just going to go back to where I was. So I've done the front of the stitch. I want to do the back. There we go, and take it off. So I've now got 4. So into the front, wrap it around. If I try to come straight in from the back, it can be done. You see how it's just a bit tight? So by just putting the tip of my needle in and making it a little bit looser as a stitch, it's just a lot easier to then work the purling into the back of the stitch. All right, that's the only reason I'm doing that. It just makes my life a little bit easier. Okay, and obviously it depends on your tension. Quite often when you're new to something, your tension might be very tight or it might be very loose, and that will make a difference. if you do have tension issue, if you are going to make a garment, please do a gauge swatch, okay? Because what you'll find as a new knitter is you might have quite a different tension and your gauge swatch won't match. But all you do is you adjust the size of the needles that you're using until it does match. So for example, if you're a loose knitter, you just use bigger needles. And if you're a tight knitter, you can use smaller ones, and vice versa, until you match the gauge swatch. So just experiment, and then you're good to go. But if your gauge swatch doesn't match, then your garment won't be the right size, it won't fit you. Okay, so it's really important that you do your gauge swatch. What might happen as you get more experienced as a knitter is you might find that your tension kind of evens out. So for example, I know my tension is pretty standard, and I am terrible with my knitting, at least, for not doing a gauge swatch. But I do for my crochet. Now, I've done a few here. I'm going to stop because I'm just going to purl to the end of this row now. Because that is the two most common ways of increasing. So knit front and back, purl front and back. Purl front and back is more common with toys than with garments. Knit with garments, it tends to be the knit front and back that we do. So the next thing I'm going to show you on the next row is I'm going to show you some decreases. Okay, so again, it's another way of shaping. So this is really common for kind of armholes. If you're working up, doing a bottom-up jumper, when you get to your armholes, you tend to decrease to get up to your shoulders. So the easiest one, and there are a few, is to do knit two together. Okay, and obviously the reverse of that is purl two together. And again, it's exactly what it sounds like. I'm going to knit two stitches together at the same time. So you take your first two stitches, you put your needle through both, and then you just knit as normal, round, under, and off. Okay, so you go into two stitches at once, round, under, and off. Two stitches at once, round, under, and off. Okay, and it's that straightforward. That is all that it takes to do knit two together. Okay, now what you find, I'm just going to pause mid-row here, is that you can see a slightly raised issue here, right? Just because obviously that's two stitches. There is another method of decreasing that you will come across that is very neat, and the abbreviation is PSSO. So if you see that in a pattern, PSSO. So it's basically what we do is we slip a stitch, we knit one, and then we pass the slipped stitch over. Okay, so it'll be slip one, knit one, PSSO. So slip one. So slip one is where you just put your needle in and slide it onto the other side. I've done nothing with it. I knit the next stitch, and then I take that first one, the slipped one, over the top. So this is just a different decrease. So I slip, knit the next one, and then pass the slipped one over. So both this and the knit two together do exactly the same thing. Okay, they both reduce your stitch count. Oh, I've slipped two there, so I'm just going to put my needle back in. There we go. Knit that one and then slip it over. Okay, so they both decrease, but what we get with this is we get a nice little diagonal that goes in the opposite direction. So quite often you'll find that one side of the jumper of your pattern row wants you to do this, the knit one, slip one, pass it over, and the other side wants you to do the knit two together. And it's just because it creates a neater finish with your stitches because of the direction that they go in. So this one, slip one, knit the next one, pass the slip stitch over. Okay, or we have knit two together where we knit into two and we wrap around. Okay, so those are your decreases on a knit row. Just going to finish this row off, and then I'm going to show you decreases on a purl row. Okay, now obviously this isn't going to make anything in particular. I am just demonstrating you some different stitches here, so my actual work just looks a bit weird because I'm just randomly increasing and decreasing all over the place. So on a purl row, again, purl 2 together is the most common one that you'll have to do. And like knit 2 together, it's exactly what it says. It's purl, so make sure you've got your yarn at the front, and you're going to go into 2 stitches at the same time. So I've got my needle through 2, wrap around, under and off. So instead of 2 stitches, I've got 1. So into 2, wrap it around, under and off, into 2. Now this one's a little bit trickier because I've gone a bit tight on the previous row. So getting through my first stitch is easy enough, but getting my needle under my second stitch is just a little bit trickier. Okay, I'm just having to wrestle with it a little bit, but it's the same thing. So under 1 stitch, under 2 stitches, wrap around, under and off. Okay, in theory, we could do the slip 1, purl 1, and then pass in that slip stitch over, but it's not a common stitch at all. Okay, you're much more likely to just do purl 2 together. Okay, so always just into 2 stitches, and I've only got 3 left, so I'm just going to finish there. Okay, so there's just one more increase type that I want to show you, and again, it's more common with toys, I think, in my experience, and it's where they say make one. So rather than knitting into the front and back of the stitch, they want you to make an extra stitch. So I'm just going to knit the first 2 here. So when we make one, what we do is we look between these 2 stitches, and this loop here that is in between the stitch on here and the stitch on here, I put my needle in and then I knit that loop, and that makes the stitch, and then you knit the next one. Okay, so you're looking for the loop in between your stitches, you put the tip of your needle in and then just knit it as if it was a stitch, and then you knit the next one. Okay, so again, looking for the loop in between, and that's make one. That's the only other increase that you're likely to need as you get started. So those are your increase and decrease stitches for knitting and purling. Okay, so like I say, at this point, you should be brave enough to go and have a go at any garment you can think about, or a toy, if that's what you prefer. There's lots out there, and you are more than well equipped to get started.